Welcome to Supernormalized, and I'm your host CJ. Today's discussion is with Dominic, who's had some unusual experiences with a trickster spirit during a BDSM scene. He also had an experience of possession which was driving him towards a very ugly event which potentially could have led to suicide. Thankfully, that didn't happen. And there's also some salty talk and discussion of the use of psychedelics and peak experiences and Ouija boards. If any of that stuff is something that is not to your taste, it is advisable that you switch off now and come back during when we have another episode. Otherwise, if you're intrigued, please listen. Today we have on the show Dominic, who's had various experiences of entities harassing him over time. A full-on experience of when he was in a work situation where a treasured work device he was using at the time apportated out of the room, out of his hand, and out of complete sight, to his surprise. And we're also talking about his experience with the Ouija board. So today, I'd like to introduce you, Dominic. Hello, Dominic.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, good. So you've had various experiences over time. Now, the first one that you wanted to talk about was the your experiences using the Ouija board and how that played out in your life. How old were you at the time when all this started?
My three friends and I were in our late 20s.
Late 20s, okay.
Yeah, I bought not a traditional Ouija board. It was something called the Psychic Circle.
Okay.
So it's, a commercial board with a disc instead of that traditional teardrop kind of device.
Yes.
And it came with a lot of instructions and, how to protect yourself. And it was quite detailed in that way.
Right.
And we started using it at a friend's house, and
Okay.
we started to get really amazing results. And
Well,
we
define
tested
amazing.
it.
What happened?
Well, before we started using the disc, because it was a round plastic clear disc,
Yeah.
we tested it in the sense there was four people, in just four directions, just very lightly touching the disc.
Yeah.
And before we started doing it properly, we tried to move it to see if it could actually move. And it was very hard to move it backwards. So everyone could push it forward in their direction of what forward is, but no one could get it to move backwards. So I thought, okay, well, that's a pretty good test to see if anyone's actually, trying to cheat this and whatever.
Right.
Would they be able to move it in every direction? And we couldn't, because we were so lightly touching. To make it come back, you have to essentially grip the disc. You
Right.
couldn't just pull it back, because I really want to emphasize this. We're very lightly touching it.
Right.
And then
So when you tried to pull it back, it was actually creating more friction, so it's just nearly impossible to pull back.
you just couldn't, like, you'd have to lift your finger up and try and dig your nail in to catch something to get it to come backwards.
Strange.
And then when it actually started to work, apart from feeling like there was something inside the disc, it was such a fluid motion. There's no way we could fake this. In every direction, it was moving lightning speed. It wasn't
How did that
slow.
make you feel? How did that make you feel?
It was very shocking and intense.
Did any of you expect that at all? I mean, was that
No,
what you're looking for?
This is the first time any one of us ever tried to use something like this.
Did anyone before this have any experiences of supernatural, paranormal?
Well, there was a time, I would say, out of the group, there was probably only me.
Right.
When I was much younger, when I was about like 14 or 15, a couple of friends came over my house when my parents were away.
Okay.
And we tried to do a board, but we tried to use the Ouija board, but not with a properly manufactured and laid out unit. We just had, letters and numbers on the table, and we used the glass.
Yeah.
And we tried 4 times over 4 different nights, and we could never get it to work. But what happened was every time we would start using it, the phone would ring, the home phone. And this was at a time before mobiles existed. So
Right.
that no one was actually able in the room able to do it as a prank or whatever. And the strangest thing was during those 4 nights, the phone would ring every 10, 15 minutes, and you'd pick it up and there's no sound, no dial tone, nothing. And that would happen
Wow.
every 15, 20 minutes all the way through to sunrise. So
Did
we'd
that
stopped, we put all the pieces away, but it would keep going. It got so bad that my parents changed the home phone number, thinking that it was a friend or someone doing prank calls to the house.
right? And what did you think it was?
I have no idea.
Right.
That one, I have no idea. So
Mm.
that one, we had some success in getting some paranormal weird things happening. But the real success is once we had the board and we're at a different house, and we went through the process. We followed the instructions to the
Mm.
letter, with protection, kind of what you call them, spells, or um, what would be the right word for it? Um, Protection.
Yeah, protection
Uh,
method. Yeah.
yeah, we were following it to the letter because we didn't want to get it wrong,
Yeah.
and we thought whoever wrote the book and the instructions actually knows what they're doing. Um, and then we were getting the amazing results, as in getting clear answers. The movement of it was really intense. And once, and I don't know if this was psychosomatic, but it felt like there was something in the disc. There felt like there was a power, there was like a tiny vibration to it. And the stunning bit was that it was moving in all directions fluently. And there was
Wow.
4 people who we were lifelong friends from school, who all
Mm.
committed to not doing, not trying to prank it or anything.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then our last experience with it, the disc was kind of not moving so well. And
Okay.
my intuition, I was generally the one asking the questions. And my intuition said to me, ask if there's a problem.
Right.
And I said, is there a problem? And it goes straight to yes with no jittery movement.
Oh.
And then I said, and then intuition led to, is there a problem with someone in the circle? And it went straight to yes again.
Oh.
And I go, spell out the name. And it spelled out a 4-letter name of the guy sitting next to me on the right. And he just he went white and nearly fainted. And that was the
Right.
last time we ever used it. It was,
That was too close, too much of a close call, you know.
yeah, we're just thinking, okay, we're starting to mess with stuff we don't really understand.
Did the phone ring at all at the other
No,
place? No.
this was about 10 years later. There was
Yeah.
about 10 years between the two.
Okay.
This is when mobiles did exist. No phones were ringing, nothing
Mm.
like that. So
Okay.
that happened in the first experience where it didn't really work was in my parents' house.
Right.
And the time that it did was in my mate's garage. So 2 different locations.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it was really intense. It was scary and exciting all at the same time.
Right. So these are your early experiences with um, out there sort of experiences. Now you've had other experiences that you wanted to talk about as well, and one of them was to do with the apportation of an object that you use in your work. What happened there?
Yeah, so I'll give you a bit of background. I used to work as a professional BDSM dominant in a BDSM house in a major city in Australia. And I didn't know at the time when I started to work there, but I got told of this when how do you say it? Apportation?
Apportation.
Yeah, when the application happened, that the building that we were in was one of the first jails ever in Australia's history.
Wow. Right.
So it had a lot of obviously quite negative and probably really intense experiences in there, and very
Right.
likely countless people died. in that
Yeah.
place.
So how did this
So,
experience roll out? I mean, what was going on at
so
the time
it's
without too much detail, but enough.
I can go into a little bit of detail. Obviously can't mention any names, but
Yeah.
yeah. So I'll try and paint the picture for your
Yeah.
listeners. I'm in a rectangle room. So everyone picture a rectangle in front of you.
Yeah.
On the left-hand side of the rectangle is a boarded up fireplace.
Right.
Uh, then I have to lay out the equipment in the room. So right next to um, the boarded up fireplace, let's say at the top left of the rectangle, is a massage table. It's a very basic bench, just like a massage table.
Yeah.
And the only other pieces of equipment and furniture in the whole room was one semi throne looking chair and a little, what do you call it? Like a hairdresser's little trolley. You know how when the hairdressers have their trolleys and they've got all the bits and pieces next to them?
Yeah, like a work trolley.
Yeah. So it's nothing major. So there's only three pieces of mobile furniture is in this room. There is nothing else. No
Right.
windows. I said there was one other thing, which was just like an air conditioning unit up near the top of the roof.
Right.
Um, so there's nothing in the room except that. The ground is padded rubber. So because of the nature of the work that we do there,
Mm.
sometimes the clients are on the floor. And so instead of having carpet on there, which is hard to clean, we just have padded rubber.
Right.
And it's one continuous piece of rubber which fit the whole dimensions of the room.
Almost like a gym.
So so
Yeah.
I've got the client bent over on the massage table bench.
Mm.
I'm standing behind her. To my left, literally 90 degrees to my left, is the boarded up fireplace.
Right.
And I was using a flogger in my right hand. So my right hand is away, it's not the closest arm or hand to the boarded up fireplace. So I was
Yeah.
using the flogger on her, but my hands were a little bit slippery because of like lubricant and stuff. And I was swinging the flogger. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And the flogger fl came out of my hand, which is not unusual. That has happened more than once. That during a hot and heavy session, that the flogger leaves. But the flogger leaves in the opposite. Now, this is the important bit to remember. It is literally the opposite direction of the fireplace, and it
Right.
hits the floor. I hear it. I hear it hitting the rubber. It's just this faint little thud. I go to pick up the flogger. I can't find it. I spend a couple of minutes because I can't, I can't really break the flow of the session too much. So I spend a couple of minutes looking, like literally only 1 to 2 minutes. And I go, okay, don't worry about it. I'll find it later and I'll keep going because I had to keep my focus on the client.
Yeah.
I get another flogger, keep going on with the session. The session ends. I've got my eyes on the client the entire time. The session ends. I call up the secretary. The secretary walks her out, takes her to the shower. The client leaves. Then, of course, I start to clean up. So part of my duties is to obviously clean up all of my equipment and wipe down the room with ViraClean, just anywhere that the client has touched. I have to prepare it for the next dominatrix or pro dom who's got a session in there next.
Right.
And I start looking for this flogger, and it's nowhere to be seen. I spent easily 30 minutes looking for this thing, but there's nowhere it can be. I look under the chair, I look in the dolly, the trolley, not the dolly. I look everywhere that it could conceivably be, and it's not there. So I didn't think at the time anything of like, okay, I'm an idiot. It must be somewhere plainly obvious or whatever, and I'm just leaving because I have to go.
Right.
Um, I then ring the boss. I had a boss at the time,
Yeah.
and I tell her, this is what's gone on. If anyone sees it, let me know. And she goes, oh, it's very likely the ghost has taken it. I go, what do you mean? She goes, you're not the first person who's reported something missing that shouldn't be missing or easily be able to find. I go, tell me more. And then she tells me that there's a mischievous ghost in the place, that it was originally um, one of Australia's oldest prisons, and that, you know, next time you're in, we'll look together. So I come back, I think it was only a few days later, and her and I looked for easily an hour. Another hour. The room's not, it's maybe 1.5 times the size of an average bedroom. It's nothing, it's not massive. And there's no ledges. There's only very little furniture. It's not complicated. The
Yeah,
room
it's
is quite
mostly
sparse.
featureless. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
A splitting,
there's nowhere it could have fallen, and
not that I could see. I even looked above the air conditioner just in case it
yeah,
bounced 2 meters in the air
yeah,
and landed on top of the
on
air
top of it.
conditioner.
What about okay? So what about the fireplace? You say it's boarded up. Is it like
Yeah,
completely
we'll
enclosed?
we'll get to that right at the end.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the next important bit is she goes, look, you need to make friends with it, have a chat, and ask it to return the flogger for you. I went, are you kidding? She goes, no, do it. So she leaves the room, and I sit there and I voice out, hey, you're more than welcome to, watch. I don't know if you wank in the spirit world, do that if you want. I really want that flogger back. It's has great sentimental value, as well as it's an important work tool, but it's one of the first floggers I've ever owned. I really, really want it back. I felt quite strange doing that.
All right. And now, did you feel
And
strange because you have more of a scientific mindset, or what?
yeah,
Why?
just because I've never had except for that Ouija board experience, I've never had any direct experiences with anything paranormal outside of that. So, I kind of still have my doubts about the Ouija board. I just don't know what to think. So
Right.
I do consider myself quite scientifically minded.
Yeah.
Um, I'm never really bought into religion or anything like that. And I like what I can see in front of me.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I don't have an open mind. I'm just, I just oscillate between the two with more of a scientific bend.
Mm.
And then I leave, and I didn't get any work for about another 4 to 6 weeks.
Right.
But I did set, I was quite genuine. I didn't do it with a doubting mind. I went, right, well, I do trust my boss. She's
And
had
mm,
quite a lot of paranormal experiences.
and
She
this has
knows
happened
this.
before. Mm.
Yeah, she's claimed that it's happened before. Things have gone missing and then shown up in really strange places that weren't meant to be there. Like they weren't originally, she told me a story about certain objects appearing in other rooms, not just in the same room where they're originally from.
Yeah.
So I trusted her and I just went with it. I say I speak
So
to the ghost,
yeah.
and 4 to 6 weeks later, I come back and I got another job. And no word of a lie, I walk the second I put my foot in front. Sorry, the second I put my foot down, walking through the front door, I get a complete and total vision projected into my head. That's not normally me. You've known me for 20 years.
Yeah.
I don't walk around going, I've had a vision of this or whatever. I
Yeah.
don't do that.
You're not prone to that.
Pardon?
You're not prone to that. No.
No. Um, and I have a vision that the flogger is inside the wall cavity next to the boarded up fireplace. I go straight up into the room. I don't say hello to anyone. I notice the room's empty. I go straight in, bend down at the what I thought was a boarded up um, fireplace, and in the top right hand corner, that's about 3 feet in the air is a hole big enough just to fit your hand through. I put my hand in, go into the wall cavity, and it's at the bottom of the wall
Wow.
cavity on the floor, about a foot, no, sorry, not a foot, say about 10 centimeters to the right of the boarded up fireplace. So I had to reach in and go down. And I'm just like, what the hell is going on? There's no way that this thing bounced onto the ground, hit the wall, bounced behind me up 2 feet in the air into a wall, like into this hole that was perfect size for it, then to go down behind a wall cavity. So
Wow.
that
That
just
that would be
that
proof to
complete
me.
that completely flipped me out.
Yeah,
I
well,
was
that
just
to
like,
me that would
oh,
be proof. I
Jesus
mean, it's
Christ.
impossible. It's physically impossible.
It's hard to describe to your listeners because we don't have any, photos of it.
Hmm.
Um, oh, maybe I can actually find you a photo and draw the little diagrams.
I'll just jump in there and say we actually did get a photo, and if you wish to see it to get more of an understanding of the description of the space, go to the supernormalized with a Z, supernormalized with a Z.com, and you'll see on the episode for this one, number 4, the photo of the actual room. Now back to the show. You've got this image here of the room that the apportation had appeared in. Now, looking at that image, can you tell me more?
So where the green X is,
Yeah.
that's the hole where you reach up. So the hole, like it's all boarded. So you have to reach underneath the lip to access the hole.
Wow.
Um, and then where the blue X is where the flogger actually was inside the wall cavity down at the bottom.
Okay. All right.
So, and I was standing facing the right hand side of the picture,
Okay.
and you can see the bench thing um, where the person was bent over.
Okay.
So yeah,
Oh,
that's
right. Okay. So you're working that way, and so you're lifting your right arm up,
correct.
and it's sort of if anything, it's got to go towards the wall over there near the chair, if anything, and like in opposite direction altogether.
It flew the 100% opposite direction.
Wow.
So that's what I mean when I said it has to go up like 2 feet into, or at least 1 to 2 feet in the air. It has to bounce up and go underneath the lip, inside the hole, which you can't
Yeah.
see unless
Inside
you're
the
bending
hole,
down
up and
looking up.
yeah, and then up and under into a wall cavity,
Yep.
and then down.
So that whole thing is boarded off, except for a tiny hole that you can fit your hand through underneath the lip of the rim of the um, fireplace.
God. It's obviously physically impossible with
I
normal
don't see
with
how I
with
don't
normal
see
physics.
I don't see how any way it could have happened,
Mm,
specifically because it went the opposite direction.
mm,
Now, if it flew in the direction of the fireplace and I was using my left hand, then I'd say, okay, maybe,
mm.
but no.
Okay. Wow, that's intense.
Yeah, but the flogger flew in the opposite direction. And if anyone knows what a flogger is, it's like a small mini whip. It's not round, it's, a piece of wood with leather
Mm.
tails on it. Even if you throw this thing on any floor, it doesn't bounce.
Yeah.
Like at the
It
most
just
it will
absorbs the
bounce is,
energy and hits the
yeah, at the
ground.
most it will bounce is like maybe 2 centimeters
Yeah.
high, not like 2 feet. And it would have had to gone around me, behind me, and it didn't. There was just no way.
So when it
It was
happened, you actually had your hand raised up in the air behind you.
No, it was so I strike like I was playing like you're playing tennis. So
Yeah.
pretend you're doing like a forehand hit, a stroke.
Yes.
So I was halfway through the stroke and the flogger went 90 degrees to the right,
Wow.
like in because it,
Just
it
did you
flew
feel it
out of my
slip
hand.
out of your fingers like
Yeah, yeah,
it's
100%.
ah right.
So I was using it at the time and
Mm.
I could hear that it landed to my right with the where it eventually showed up is completely the opposite direction on the left.
Wow.
Um, so that was, yeah, after that I just thought, oh Jesus Christ, what's the
Yeah,
nature of reality?
yeah, well, yeah, it does make you question things because it pretty much upends all uh,
Mm.
scientific definitions, really.
And then after that I spoke to the secretary, and she's had multiple instances of when she's the only person in this place is 3 stories, where she was the only person in the building closing up for the night, and she hears footsteps where there's no one around. She saw like an apparition go past her, and it was like half torso from
Right.
the waist up. There's
Mm.
been multiple instances of people being shoved down the stairs. This is what I find out later after from multiple different dominatrixes who are working there,
Right. You've
that they've
never
had.
experienced anything more than the
No, that was the only
apportation?
thing. That was the only thing that I experienced.
And have you been
But
back
so
there since? Or
yeah, yeah, I kept working there for years after.
yeah, right.
I wasn't really afraid. It was trippy. It
Yeah.
was a little bit scary, but I wasn't afraid.
Did you have ever have any more impressions of that spirit being around?
Not at all. No,
And no more like visions or anything?
no. I,
Right.
I don't know if I'm going to say something which I don't. This is something I can't really put my finger on. It always felt like you're never alone in the room, but I don't know if that was just a something inside my head or if that was
Right.
actually from something external.
Was that a feeling of being watched, or was
Just
someone
you just
there?
weren't alone.
Right.
I Yeah, I just never felt alone in the room. But once I understood the history of the building, it made a lot of things made sense.
Yeah, right, right. Because I've spoken to other people about that feeling when spirits are around, and it feels like something is taking space. Like you just know it's there. You know, you just know it's there. Like
But
even when you go bushwalking or something, you feel like you're being watched. That sort of feeling
no,
too.
I've never really had that feeling before. Only
Mm,
really had it in that building.
yeah,
Um, Even when we were doing the Ouija board, I never really had that feeling. It was just in that main red room. It was called the red room,
right.
because its walls were all painted red.
Oh, okay. Right.
Just in that room, I felt it.
Okay.
I've the bottom floor was actually kind of like the basement dungeon space, and I
Right.
never really liked the vibe of that room. I couldn't put my finger on why. I'm
Okay.
guessing that a lot of really horrendous things happened there hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, right. Mm. Well, of course, it's a ex-jail.
Yeah, it was one of Australia's first. So,
You've also had other experiences where you've been harassed by entities, and
yes.
they didn't go so well. So, how did this harassment start? When did this happen? Was what was going on in your
So
life at the time?
it was 2015. I had a car accident that put me into pretty severe complex PTSD.
Yes.
Um, and about a year after that, well, that one was weird in itself, in the sense that it's the only time I've ever heard a voice in my head, and it said,
Right.
"You're about to have a car accident." And then 10 minutes later, I have a car accident. And the guy ran a red light, and I T-boned him. And instead of going into shock straight away, I actually went into anger. So instead of like, because when I was, in those microseconds before between the time where you've hit the brakes and you hit the car,
Yeah.
there is a period of time. A lot of people say, oh, time slows down. It kind of did, but not so much. But instead of shock, I went into anger because I was kind of just upset, a little bit
Right.
at myself, like, why didn't I pull over? Because I had this, it was beyond a sense of knowing. I had a voice say, "You're about to have a car accident." I don't hear voices. I'm not
What?
schizophrenic.
So the voice
Um,
was. Wait, just want to question you about the voice. Was the voice gendered? Was it loud, quiet?
no, it was very, I would say if it had anything, it had more of a masculine tone.
Hmm.
Um, but it wasn't. it wasn't a whisper. It's like I could hear a sentence being said inside my head. It's the only way I
Oh,
can explain it.
I completely
So
understand. Yeah.
this happens. I go into complex. So I did go into shock about 4 or 5 hours later,
Right.
and that really messed up my life. Um,
Okay.
about a year after that, I woke up into chronic fatigue. But about 3 months after the accident, I flew to see a tantric Tibetan Buddhist Lama who I've done some quite intense work with, and he's taught me sound healing and a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah.
And he's done healings on me before,
Okay.
and they were really profound, and they got me out of a lot of deep stuff. So in my quest to understand what the hell was going on and how do I fix what I'm going through, I went to see him. And at the time, I was a pretty uh, regular dope smoker. I wasn't like waking and baking and smoking weed when I wake up, but after like 3 or 4 p.m., I'd have a joint in the day.
Right.
So this is important for the later part of the story.
Okay.
So I go down and see him. He does a clearing. Nothing really. I didn't really get any profound shifts like I have in the past with other issues.
Right.
Anyways, I fly back. I fly back home, and I hadn't smoked weed for many days at this point. And weed is very habitual in the sense of it's a lot to do with your environment. So I didn't really have a desire to smoke. I just, because I did smoke when I get home, because I always have. And the second I smoke the joint, and you know, I'm not new to I wasn't new to smoking weed, and I know dosages, and I've never really had any majorly bad or extremely psychedelic experiences smoking weed. I smoke a
Yeah.
joint, nothing, not a high amount, just a little bit. I'd say half an hour to 40 minutes later, I can't even put words to describe how bad I start feeling. Like I think something is really, really, really wrong. And it's not an overdose, it's not a green out, just I couldn't put my finger on it. The
Right.
closest thing I could describe it to, it felt like I was having a Kundalini awakening, but like a negative one. So if you know anything about Kundalini awakenings, for some
I do.
people, when they have it,
Hmm.
they can go into what's called Kundalini syndrome.
Mm.
So when they're not ready for it, if the Kundalini pops for them, they can have quite detrimental and lifelong issues after that.
Yeah.
That is akin to schizophrenia.
Mm.
So I start going into this bad mode. And I ring up the llama. I catch him on the mobile before I was barely able to speak at this point. And I ring him up and I go, am I having a Kundalini awakening? Because I know he has the abilities, and within the Tantric Tibetan Buddhist system,
Yeah.
they dabble with Kundalini and stuff. So I
Right.
ask him directly, did you do this? Like, did you plant a seed of it, or like what's happening to me? He says nothing and just sits there. It's like he was scanning the metaphysical highways of what's going on.
Yeah.
And he just says, you're being attacked by an entity, and hangs up the phone.
What? That's not
Yeah,
helpful.
no,
How did you feel then? Abandoned? What?
a little bit concerned.
Yeah. Well,
But he's
understandably.
he was 1,000 k's away. What can he do?
Come on, they can do remote healing.
Yeah,
And also
well, he
do
did
deliverance from that distance as well. I mean, seriously, that's a weird thing to do.
for whatever reason, nothing went down, and he hung up the
Maybe he got
phone.
scared. Maybe it was something he looked at and went, "Oh fuck, that's too much for me. I'm
I
out."
have no idea. And I'd say about another 10 of I didn't have much time. So I was starting to Google Kundalini syndrome, and
Man,
words don't really put into play what I was feeling.
Yeah.
And then I felt like I'm about to lose all sense of reality. And
Yeah.
then it starts. My hands move without me putting any conscious thought into it. I
Yeah.
start walking around the house without any conscious thought. I can see myself doing things and I cannot control them. And then whatever, I don't know if it's my brain, I don't know if it's the drugs, I don't think it was. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've got a massive question mark on this whole thing.
You know,
It's
that's that's
driving
that's
me,
called possession.
it's driving me to find a gun and put it to my head.
Yeah, it's possession.
I don't own a gun,
Yeah.
but it's driving me to find one.
Yep. Wants to take you
So
out.
the most I could do, I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? And just before all of this started, I found a web page of a person who went through Kundalini syndrome who used Valium to control it.
Yeah, it's flattening.
So, yeah, normally if you give me 1.15 milligram Valium, I'll be asleep. I've popped 40 milligrams and I'm still not sitting down.
Yeah.
I'm still like moving. And then I kept going until I was able to knock myself out. I eventually somehow, like I had to have, like I was trying to use one arm to control the other. I'm using everything that I can to try and sit still while popping Valiums nonstop. And then eventually I pass out. And then I call a mate over. And for the next 24 hours, again, I don't understand any of this. I felt like I needed to be in hot water. So I was basically in the bathtub for 24 hours while my mate was doing trips to the kettle and back because we'd emptied the tank in 10 minutes. And he was just nonstop pouring hot water. It does not matter how hot it was, I was cold as it gets. So if anyone can understand what the hell
Yeah,
happened,
I can understand it because like what you just
I can't.
described was is a basic is a possession. It's literally possession. Now I have experienced exactly that same thing that you went through. And I didn't even know you went through this, so it's quite surprising to hear it. And it's really
Mm.
good to hear it because it makes me go, "Oh yeah, that's what happened to me." So,
I never usually tell. That was quite stressful, so I don't really
oh God, I
usually
know. Don't
talk
you
about it
worry.
much.
It's awful. It's totally awful. And I had a similar thing happen to me back in 2000-ish. And mine was because of all of the work I was doing with entities that it's a big story, but let's just say it was detrimental to um, my own experience of the world, and it left me open, and I was so open that I got attacked by a couple of entities, and their whole point was to try and make me want to off myself. It was awful.
Mm.
And when they tuned into me, like, because they were riding me, like I call them hitchhikers now, but they were riding me, and they would do it to different degrees, and there was two of them, and they extremely powerful, so they could actually make things like happen in reality around me in accordance to my personal view of reality at the time. So if I
Right.
if I kept things really clear and what I would say positive, then clear and positive things would happen, and things would be
Mm.
smooth and things would be beautiful. But as soon as I had one negative thought, it was like being dragged into abject terror and having um, myself fragmented. I felt like I was being fragmented, and I was like, "Oh, this is awful," and I just would feel such extreme terror that I couldn't explain it. And anytime that was on, then that was happening, people around me were fighting. There was violence, car accidents, all sorts of garbage. So it was really, really intense. And I had to isolate myself away from society at that stage. And I happened to move up into the hills of Mullumbimby, up into Main Arm at the time. And I didn't know what to do with myself. I happened to move into a house with a dude that I'd known through other people, and he was a witch, you would say, a wizard, sorcerer of sorts as well. But he knew about certain things, but I wasn't telling him about what was going on for me because it was just way intense. But living in that house, he was told me about a bookshop in Byron Bay that I should go and see. And at that stage, I didn't know it even existed and went there and I found a book that actually helped me to start getting through this experience. But really weirdly at the time, this other being turned up, like because these things that were just making my life buzz. And that's the only way I could explain it. It's like when they were on, it was like being inside a resonant thing that was continuous and awful and terrifying. And so I was always looking for a way out of that at the same time because it was driving me to suicide, just to put it plainly. And to me, that was just awful, like totally awful.
Yeah.
Um,
I'd
and
never been
I
suicidal until that. I've never had any inclination of suicide in my whole life.
I didn't know I could be possessed. So I didn't believe it was possible, right? And so when it
Right.
happened to me, I was like, okay, this is what possibly possession could be, and these entities were having a riot trying to knock me off.
Well,
Um,
for me, it only lasted that one instance. I don't know if the llama did anything after the
yeah,
phone call to help.
right,
Um, I wouldn't be surprised if he did.
right,
Um, well, it makes I've heard so many times through so many different, spiritual people, spiritual writing, just general spiritual thought that smoking weed opens you up
yeah.
to having entities come on in.
It does open you
And
to hitchhikers for sure.
well, it's felt like, 1 + 1 = 2, as in the clearing, the healing that I got, then coming home and stupidly smoking the weed allowed something to come in.
So you think you might have
Because,
been already open at the time, and
oh, well,
then adding that on top just was like, oh,
well,
here's a seat, come in,
the
have a seat.
the healing that I experienced from him the first time was beyond profound.
Right.
So that's why I went to see him. I just didn't know that this was going to happen afterwards. So the first time I went to see him, I was in the absolute pits of despair. The love of my life had broken up with me.
Right.
And I turned to drinking something shocking. I'd never really been drunk a day in my life before. And then
Oh,
I
okay.
went from zero to drinking 2 liters of wine a day for 4 months.
Yeah.
And then I found this llama by accident where I was at a particular time. And
Okay.
I found out that he does healings. And I'd never had a healing before. I just sat down with no real expectation, but obviously hope that it can help. And
Yeah.
I went from drinking 2 liters of wine a day to never drinking again
Right.
instantaneously without even telling him what the problem was.
That's
So,
awesome.
yeah, so I knew he was quite powerful in what he's done. He's studied, I know his history now inside out. He's studied tantric Tibetan healing for over 30 years.
Yeah.
Um, so whatever he did cleans you up on some very profound levels. I just
Yeah.
didn't know that messing with it with weed at that time would just literally open me up to an attack.
Right. Right. Well, I didn't believe he could be attacked. And
I had no, I had no idea what the hell it was. I knew at the
yeah.
time because I knew you had been dabbling with this stuff. You'd never really told me at the time any detail about it.
Yeah.
Um, and again, I only heard, just general thought from spiritual type people
Yeah.
that you were able to be attacked by entities. I never didn't give it any clout. But after that, I just was like, oh, god damn. And I stopped smoking weed on the spot.
Yeah.
That was too much.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it's when imagine that we're living in a spiritual world and we're actually surrounded by spirits. Everything is made of spirits continuously, and not all of them actually have a
Good intention.
yeah, good intentions. Yeah. And so when you put yourself in a position where you align with their sort of I don't know, resonance, vibration, or whatever you want to call it, that gives them a chance to jump on and have a ride. And of course, they want to ride in the 3D because the 3D is probably the most experiential version of reality. But other dimensions of reality, no, they're all experiential, but not as detailed as this. So any chance they get, they jump on, have a ride, and use the body. And they're always out to attack. Well, I wouldn't say all of them either, but the ones that have nefarious ideas are always out looking for a weakness. And this is my
So
belief from my experience of seeing this stuff happen to myself and other people. Um, but it doesn't mean you should be scared of the world or anything like that. It's just a matter of just being aware, because it is literally, even as the Christians say, it's like a spiritual war. It's always going on. It's always happening, and they're always looking around for ways in.
funny you
So
mention the Christians, because after this period of time, as well as many years of ill health since then,
yeah,
been seriously considering doing some sort of, I wouldn't know, the only word I've got for it is experiencing an exorcism to see if there are any things on a deeper level inside of me still lingering around and
right.
zapping energy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, why not try it and then find out?
I wouldn't know who to turn to.
Well, you just need to have deliverance, and you could. I mean, you're Catholic, or you're from the
Yeah, I
Catholic
was
faith,
I was I was raised Roman Catholic.
right? So you can literally go to your parents' church and just ask for help.
Mm, that would be a trip.
Well, they'd probably get excited.
Hey?
They'd probably get excited. Be like,
Oh
he's going
no.
to our church.
Yeah, right. Hi, Ma, Dad, I need an exorcism.
No, just say you want to talk to the Holy Father, priest, or whatever they call them. I don't know. But
Well,
yeah, I would recommend it if
a
you think that
friend,
might work.
I'm not sure if I told you, a friend of a friend is employed by the Catholic Church to do exorcisms on behalf of them and
Yeah,
gets
you had
flown all
mentioned
over
that.
the world.
Yeah, yeah,
So once I met him, I'll be like, I didn't have a chance to do anything with him at the time. I
right.
thought this is interesting. But what makes it even more interesting is that he's a Taoist practitioner, like he's a
Yeah.
Taoist master, being
Okay.
employed by Catholics because they think that the demons and entities from the Catholic side of the supernatural don't know how to deal with the Taoist framework. So that's why they've
Anything,
employed him.
use anything that works. That's the bottom line of chaos magicians. It's like if it works, just use it. So like obviously they're like Catholic magicians. They're like, well, our stuff's not working. Get somebody else onto it.
I wish I could order an exorcism on Amazon Prime. It'd be here tomorrow.
Well, there is a book that I've
Oh
heard
yeah,
of. Yeah, and it's called
is it
it's only a
DIY
demon. It's
exorcism?
only a demon. It's called. And I forgot the name of the person that wrote it, but he's a like a 30-year exorcist in the United States, and he talks about
And he
ways
teaches you
to.
how to do it
Yep, in
yourself.
his book. In his book. Yep.
Ah,
Yeah. So it's sworn by the deliverance preachers in the US that work with people that have problems with possession.
oh man, with all the dark stuff I've done in my life, I reckon they'll be there for a couple of days.
Well, it has been said by other people that when you have some hitchhikers, you actually get exhausted and feel tired a lot, and that's quite normal. And the thing
That's
is,
just
when you have the hitchhikers on, they feel everything you're feeling, right? So if you have pain, they jump off. If like they don't like it, so that's why ECT works. So like electroshock therapy that shocks them out and gets them out, kicks them off.
right.
And in the early 1900s, they used to practice hydrotherapy in mental hospitals because they found that it would actually relieve the patients of all of their entities. Well, they wouldn't say entities, but that's what it was. And they'd come back from being thrown
Wow.
into ice cold pools.
Full on.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe after this, go and take a really ice cold shower.
I've never really been a fan of that.
Yeah, we'll see. Neither have they.
Well, I hope there's no more entity issues in the future. I
Yeah,
hope none of my other objects go missing
yeah,
and we don't play with the Ouija board anymore.
yeah. That sounds like some wise moves.
Yeah,
Yeah,
done enough of that.
yeah. I'm not
Um,
sure that will
there
go
was
down.
this time, there was this time at the dawning in 2000. No, it's the first summer dreaming,
Yeah,
um, where the only time I ever felt like I met someone who I had a soul connection with
yeah,
straight away,
yeah,
and we shared a tab of acid, like nothing big dose. I had half and he had half.
yeah.
And he was a spiral dancer. So he's the kind of guy that once he's a bit out there psychedelically, he he starts dancing in an uncontrollable spiral. He can't control it. Like
Oh,
he
that's weird.
he literally can't
Like
control it.
a whirling dervish.
Yeah, yeah. And he kept like Ollie Wisdom Space Tribe was playing, so the dance floor was in a complete rapture of psychedelic madness.
Yeah.
And he kept spinning, and at multiple times he was spinning so uncontrollably he punched someone in the head
Bloody
because
hell.
he had no control. So
Yeah.
multiple instances. This is the first time I met him.
Oh,
Multiple instances, like I crash tackled him multiple times just to control him.
bloody hell.
And I said, dude, you got to calm the fuck down. Multiple instances, I'm crash tackling him because he was punching people in the head without. He's completely pacifist. He wasn't, aggressive to anyone. He was just spiraling so uncontrollably that he had no idea where he was.
That's
So
strange.
I crash tackled him twice, and then he was kind of okay because I brought him to the side of the dance floor where no one was around. I go sit down because I'm physically exhausted from crash tackling this guy
Yeah.
twice. And then he starts again. He spirals into the middle of the dance floor.
Yeah.
I go, oh, Jesus Christ. And then I go, let's try something. I feel like I'm connected to him. So I say his name inside my head. I know I'm on half a tab of acid. I get this.
Yeah.
I say his name inside my head and I go pivot left, and he pivots left. I go, now go down 2 meters. He goes down 2 meters. I go right, pivot right. And I basically remote control him like I felt like I was remote, like it was a remote control car and I had the control through
Wow.
2,000 people dance floor, and I get him to spiral off into the bushes.
To the safe spot.
His girlfriend comes up to me from the other side of the dance floor and goes, I heard everything you said to him inside his head. Thank you for doing that. And goes off and collects him.
What?
For real. I was,
Oh, psytrance parties are always weird. I love that.
oh, mate, I was just going, okay. I thought that was all in my head. And this is just random occurrence that this uncontrollable maniac is listening exactly to what I'm telling him to do, weaving him through 2,000 people.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
his girlfriend comes up and says, I heard all of that.
And
She
this
could
is in
hear it as
front.
well.
This is in front of like a 40K sound system or something, right?
Yeah, no, I was over 20 meters away from him. I wasn't speaking.
Yeah,
It
yeah, I
was
know.
all in
I'm
my
just
head.
making sure that's understood.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, there's massive sound system. There's no way. No, even if I was yelling at him, he was not in any coherent space to understand the words being yelled at him. So that happened. But that man, psytrance parties were like a weird vortex for psychedelic paranormal experiences.
Yeah.
Like multiple times it was collective, visions, uh, weird telepathy, all sorts of strange stuff.
You've had other experiences as well that you would call ecstatic, and these happened on the Natch, and it was when you were DJing one time in Sydney Park. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I was DJing to tens of thousands of people. Um, I was 2 stories up. The DJ booth was quite high. And to lead up to this set, I put as much intent and effort as I could. So, as well as I wanted, I experimented with a natural high. So, for the 48 hours prior to the DJ set, I didn't have any food, pardon me, any water, no nicotine, no weed, nothing, just slept. So I went into it quite dehydrated, but still quite elevated. I felt pretty clean. The idea was to um, see what state I could reach while DJing psytrance, which was, the music's been designed to give people an existential experience. It's not just like house music or any generic form of dance music. So I'm DJing, and then about halfway through, something takes over. The only way I could describe it is literally I started to channel something. I don't understand what. And every mix was completely perfect. Every track that I selected, I had no, I couldn't fault myself in any of it. So for me, this was the best DJ set of my career, which went over 20 years. And so halfway through, I'm pulling CD cases out. Sorry, I'm pulling the CD out of cases while not even consciously looking at them. And that's the exact track that I'm looking for. So it felt like I was just feeding the crowd something, and I'm making no conscious decision over what I'm playing at the same time I know what I want to play. And halfway through this set, when I hit this, what you could call a peak flow state, felt like I'm completely in sync. I look down, there's people are going completely mad. I'm hitting the spot with what this music's designed to do. Then I catch myself and go, fuck, I'm hungry. I haven't eaten for 2 days.
Yeah.
Like, what's that thing in my stomach hurting? Ah, hunger. So there's no one around. I'm 2 stories up, and I say, I wish I had a plate of sushi. Japanese food's my favorite food. 2, 3 minutes later, there's this tiny dot appears at the back of the dance floor. It's over 500 meters or something, 400 meters, easy. And I fixate on this dot, and it was a little Japanese guy weeding his way through the dance floor, carrying a perfectly prepared plate of sushi, comes up to the dance floor right in front and bows, raises the plate up above his head. And I just couldn't believe it. That's exactly what I wanted. And I kind of put the request out there for it. And I'm yelling at the stage manager to get this guy up on the DJ deck. And yeah, that happened. I
Wow.
wouldn't know what you would call that.
It's like a
Chance.
synchronicity and also
Uh,
simultaneous, like a summoning of what you wanted exactly, which is really interesting.
if it was just a 1 in a million fluke occurrence that as I'm requesting it, it appears,
Yeah.
then so be it. But yeah, I've had a couple of experiences DJing where I've hit a zone where I was literally felt like something had taken over. I'm not in control of my hands. I'm not in control of. It's a hard thing to describe, being in control of what music I'm playing at the same time, not having any conscious thought. And when I've hit those zones, it's happened a few times that my hands reach for the CDs. Like I used to rock up back then. This is before MP3s and stuff and USB sticks. So I used to rock up to a DJ set with 200 to 300 CDs.
Yeah.
Um, and they're in CD cases sprawled all around me. And in those moments, I'm not sitting there flipping through. Like my hand would go to the CD that I needed in that moment. Because when I hit that kind of zone, there would only be one track out of all of them, which would be the perfect next track
Yeah.
to
Right.
create a journey with the psytrance in the way that I wanted. If I pick the wrong track, the whole thing stops.
Yeah.
And those critical moments, there would only be one song in the whole case, which would be the next logical um, track to pick.
Mm.
So that happened a few times. So, that's the generic hippie term for that is flow state.
Yeah.
Um,
Peak experience, flow state. Yeah.
but for me, it did feel like in those, I've DJed hundreds of times, but only those unique experiences, it actually felt like something was speaking through me.
Wow. That's
Because
cool.
I've never been able to perform like that at home.
Yeah, right.
And usually it's much easier to DJ really good sets when there's no one around and there's no pressure. Like I
Right.
DJ some really amazing sets at home,
Mm.
um, but nothing to that level. Was always in a crowd when I was doing something to create that within me, usually completely straight,
Yeah,
like beyond
right.
straight, dehydrated, hungry. There was nothing influencing me on a neurophysiological level that I could understand from anything external, whether it be food or a stimulant or even water.
Do you think that being in
Um,
that sort of state was like you're connected to something higher that
100%, because
right.
I got the idea from like the American Indians, when they do their, what's it called? When they go out.
Sundance?
Yeah, then when they do their sun dance or when they do their was it spirit quest? I can't remember the name.
Yeah,
And they go out into the wilderness with little to no water,
yeah.
and they're pushing themselves to the extreme of endurance without any stimulants or any even again basic water, and something happens to them. So for them to have that as a practice, that's how I incorporated it into my life and experimenting with it in that way.
Excellent. This reminds me of a time when I was at Burning Man, and we'd been out. I was with a couple of friends. We'd been out all day, all night. It was starting to get to the point of exhaustion. So it's about 2 a.m. And in when you're at Burning Man, it's a rather extreme event because it's in the
Mm.
desert and it's very spacious. Like there's a lot of space to get from place to place, to thing, and you have bikes, and it's very dusty, and you wear like stuff just to stop the dust and goggles and everything. And I'm riding along on the bike, a massive dust storm comes up, and I'm with one of my friends, Paul, and and it just got too much. We just stopped for a second and we just have a laugh about everything. And I just said, God damn, I could go some gyoza right now. And he said, yeah, that'd be really cool. And so we're riding along, and then out of the dust appears a little hut, and there's a dude cooking gyoza.
Oh, that's the
This
best.
actually happened, right? And he
Yeah.
and he's and, he, and we come up to him and said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Oh, I'm cooking gyoza right now. Do you want some?" And I said, "Sure, that'd be perfect." And so he had us some plates of gyoza, and we ate them, and it was like, how did that just happen?
Yeah.
But
I
that
think
was
it's
Burning Man, for us.
I
A
think
lot
it's
of
to do
stuff
with
like that.
Japanese food more than anything.
Yeah, probably.
Mystical experiences happen around Japanese food.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's what I'll eat tonight.
Mm.
But yeah, I haven't really experimented with that since, but I am thinking to return to that kind of fasting slash whatever you want to call it.
Fasting might help with your fatigue as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm working towards. But I
Just do
spoke to a couple of
fasting
people.
and steak.
I spoke to a couple of people who seem to be experts in fasting and to the point that it's their job to lead people through it. And it
Cool.
doesn't seem like that I'm healthy enough to be able to do it. I know it's a catch
Oh,
22
yeah,
that it essentially makes you healthy. But if you
yeah.
do it wrong, it can really
Harm you as well.
cause some problems.
That's true. That's
Because
true.
I want to do a 10-day fast, not just like 2 days.
Yeah. My longest was 18.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
How was
but
that?
bloody hard. Really hard. And I had migraines for about 4 days as I got off coffee. And then I hit a really nice ecstatic state that lasted pretty much the
For the
rest of it. And
God damn.
then at one stage, yeah, I just had like an extreme amount of power. I could say that.
I was gonna say when after the 4 days, did it hit like peak physical state, like your energy, clarity?
Yeah, it started to come through. And then, yeah, by about day 6 or 7, that was right on for the rest of it.
See, this is why I want to do it because from the research that I've looked into, they talk about how there's cellular regeneration and a whole bunch of um, processes kick in that kind of reset the body.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Good idea. Try,
Mm.
man.
Yeah, I just don't want to get it wrong and end up in hospital.
Of course. Dominic, thank you so much for coming on to Super Normalized and discussing your experiences of apportation and possession and working with an Ouija board. Considering all that, do you now believe in spirits?
I believe in something that I don't understand. So if that means yes, then yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you again. And yeah, I look forward to more stories from you in the future. And if you're willing to come on, that is.
Sure,
And thank you so much for your time.
not a problem. Hope
All right.
everyone has enjoyed the weird and the wonderful.
All right. Bye for now.
Ciao.
Ciao. Thanks for listening today. If you have an experience you'd like to share, please get in contact with me. You can do so via Facebook, via Instagram. Just look for the Super Normalized, which is all one word. Search on those apps to find me. Otherwise, you can send me email direct at supernormalized, which is one word, super normalized with a Z, at proton.me. If you like the show, please also share the show to your friends and rate it 5 stars on your favorite podcast app. That way, other people can find the show, which means they can get to have their experiences normalized. See you next week.